Hello everyone, I'm so glad you're joining us. And my name is Morgan, and today I will have the pleasure of co-hosting a live webinar on human rights with Joanna. Today's topic covers issues that are very complex but which need to be talked about publicly. We're going to address the reality of LGBTQ plus community in Poland and Hungary. Our guest today is Luka Dudic, who is a communication officer and a board member of HETE Society, one of the oldest and largest LGBTQ plus NGOs in Hungary. Luka graduated from University College London, UCL, in 2019 with a bachelor in history, politics, and economics. She is responsible for public relations, marketing, and communications, and is also involved in several projects, including integration at the workplace and awareness raising. Hello, Luka. Great to have you today with us. It's our great pleasure. And is there anything I have skipped in your introduction that is important to you, that you would like to mention?
Hi, Morgan. Hi, Joanna. Thank you so much for inviting me and inviting HETE Society to this talk. We're very glad to be here. I think you covered basically the basics. As you said, I'm responsible for most things public relations, and the projects that you mentioned. We have also included a project that aims to prevent hate crimes. So I think that is also exciting. And I'm just very excited to be here with you today, and I'm glad that we are having this conversation. I think that LGBTQI issues are something that needs to be discussed and that more people should be aware of. So thank you.
Definitely, let's start this broader debate about this matter, because I think there is a great need for that. So I'm gonna start easy. On 21st of March, we celebrate the International Transgender Day of Visibility. Then on 26th of April, we have International Lesbian Visibility Day. A few days ago was International Family Equality Day. So there are, of course, many more such days. And during such days, it is common to start talking about the visibility of LGBTQI community in the world and the impact of this on future generations. So do you think that increasing the visibility of LGBTQI is a way to fight injustice? And what does visibility mean to you personally?
I think that visibility is one of the best tools and one of the best efforts that the LGBTQI community has. There is a very simple reason for that. Many studies show that people who have a personal connection, who have a personal acquaintance, who identifies as lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgender, queer, or intersex, are more open and more accepting to LGBTQI people. That is because it is way harder to hate or despise or be afraid of something that you actually know. We think that invisibility leads to not just ignorance, but also a lack of knowledge and just a lack of, human connection. We also usually say that, most people do have someone who is LGBTQI in their lives. They just might not be comfortable to come out to that person. I think that these kind of studies and statistics also show that when especially young LGBTQI people see that, if you are gay, if you are trans, you can still lead a happy life. That is a very good example for them. And you might know that LGBTQI youth is an at-risk group for mental health issues. There is something called minority stress. That means that they experience microaggressions, that they are more at risk to being bullied in school or at home. They are afraid of not being accepted by their families. And if there are LGBTQI people, older LGBTQI people who are visible in their lives or in their media, then both the parents or the families or the friends and the young person can know that, being LGBTQI is okay. It's a perfectly, happy life. You can have career goals. You can have a family. So it's not something that needs to be hidden or ashamed to be ashamed of.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I was wondering, who was your role model when you were growing up? Did you have someone who was a openly LGBT person who was helping you to, to grow up and be comfortable with who you are?
Oh, I think I personally did not have that person in my personal life, but in Hungary there is still a bit of an issue with people being LGBTQI in the public eye. So we do know that some stars or celebrities are probably LGBTQI, but not a lot of them come out. In my school there was one lesbian couple, but they were kind of isolated, so that wasn't a very good example. um, but it's not just national representation that matters. That was when I was a teenager. That was a time when US based shows and US based media was picking up LGBTQI issues and topics. So that was around the time when more and more TV shows started to have an LGBTQI character. That was usually, a white cis gay guy who was, always very attractive, and he usually had so this was kind of like a quirk kind of that he's gay, but I think that now more shows make a good job of having very three-dimensional, realistic LGBTQI people, and that is also partly because more people who are in the writing room and in the producers. There are more LGBTQI people as well, but I think this is kind of, it's not just about LGBTQI people. It's true about all kinds of intersectionality, also about people of color, also about people with disabilities.
Yeah, carry on with that question. I would like to ask you, how does it feel to be out of the closet in Hungary?
Um, I think there is a big difference between being out in a city, especially in Budapest, and in the countryside. But this is not a tendency that is unique. This is kind of very common everywhere. Most LGBT people who live in the countryside usually move to a bigger town because they feel like less people know them, they receive less judgment, they have a better chance of finding a job, of finding a flat with their significant other, etc. But in Hungary, what is unique is that in recent years, there has been a big backlash and backsliding in LGBTQI rights and human rights in general. So if you look at studies, ILGA, the biggest umbrella organization for LGBTQI rights, has a ranking that they publish each year. And in 2012, Hungary was in the 9th place, and last year in the 33. So we were ranked 33, yeah, 33rd, sorry, 33rd in the ranking, which is, I mean, an unbelievable pushback. And it's partly because of legal framework. It's partly because of homophobic hate speech, homophobia being kind of normalized in parliament, in public spaces. Those kinds of things also affect public opinion very much. So you can say that in 2020, the Hungarian society was less accepting of LGBTQI people than, say, in 2015.
Yeah,
So,
you start.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to make sure. So, do you think the younger generation right now in Hungary are getting being more and more open about their sexuality or who they are? Is it a trend?
I think so. Oh, I would not say that it's a trend. It's usually kind of the politicians on the right who try to paint being LGBTQI as a trend or as an ideology, as a Western import. It is not. This is not like a well-known fact, but the very word homosexual was actually kind of coined or invented by a Hungarian thinker in the 1950s. So there has always been gay people, LGBTQI people. I think the difference is that in socialist Hungary, so up until '89, it was way harder to be out of the closet in Hungary because of the socioeconomic implications of a socialist regime.
So I was wondering, because in 2020, news spread about the conservative Hungarian MEP Josef Schayer, who was affiliated to Orban's party, and he was caught up in an orgy of 25 men in Belgium. And as we all know, Orban's political party Fidesz is very much hostile to LGBTQ+. And some people are just ironically saying that this was one of the biggest and loudest coming outs in the recent years. What was the reaction of Orban and the public to this in Hungary, and how broad it was covered in the media?
So the way it happened on a Sunday, media started to report that Josef Schayer, who has been an MEP since 2004, so for 16 years, he has stepped down from his position. And I remember that I was wondering with my coworkers, like, I asked them, like, why do you think that happened? And we were like, yeah, maybe it's, the budgetary issues that Fidesz was refusing to sign at that point. And I remember very clearly, I was sitting in the office and we got the notification on our phones at the same time that an unnamed Hungarian MEP who has since resigned, so that basically meant that Josef Schayer was caught red-handed at this gay orgy. And, it was something that I personally was astonished. And the thing is that most gay activists in Hungary who are older than me, they say that it was quite a well-known fact before he moved to Brussels that he was gay. Obviously the independent media has reported it, quite with a gusto. I would say they were loving the dirty details. However, the public media that is funded by the government, and therefore, these messages don't come across. They only reported that he stepped down and that he did it because, and he said it personally, that he stepped down because he violated the lockdown code. So he, went out after the curfew and met up people in a number that exceeded the lockdown expectations. And Orban only said that what Josef Schayer did was unacceptable to our party, and we accept his resignation. So he didn't say that he went to a gay orgy. He didn't say that he's gay. He didn't say that he was caught with sliding down on the wall. Basically, he never said any of that. So people who do not read or don't have access to the independent media, they might not know what's going on or why he actually stepped down. There is a bit of a fun fact that I would like to share. I think the most positive statistics that was ever recorded about accepting gay people in Hungary was actually recorded after the Schayer event, when one of the the statistical organizations did a survey, and 78% of respondents said that gay politicians should be able to live their lives freely and openly as anyone else.
Wow, what a change. So following this event, I can definitely say that there is a big problem with freedom of media in Hungary. Would you like to give a comment on that?
Yes. So Fidesz has been in power since 2010. Yes, 2010. And they have very slowly, well, not that slowly, pushed out any kind of opposition voices from the public media. That means that if you're an NGO, you don't have the means to go into TV or into the radio or to be represented in any kinds of newspapers that are also owned by the government or people close to the government. And that means that, for example, Hare Society, which is, as you have mentioned in the introduction, one of the biggest LGBTQ organizations, we are never mentioned in a positive way. LGBTQI issues are not portrayed on the regular basis. When they are mentioned in the context of how conversion or restorative therapies are something that work, that are, good for LGBTQI people because they make them normal. And these conversion therapies, they have been proved over and over again by experts, by psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, medical professionals, that they do not work, that these kinds of psychological or physical camps that, inflict pain and aggression and violence on those who are forced to be there, they don't change their gender identity, they don't change their sexual orientation, but they instill so much fear and shame in that person that they might not publicly say that they are still, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, or anything that they identify as. So that is something that they promote in the public media, conversion therapy, which is just very harmful, because if you're, a young LGBT person and you already fear that, you're different than your peers, and you might wish that, you blended in, you weren't different, then, hearing that kind of message is just very harmful. And, more than, I think, the 2/3 of the people who are admitted into these conversion camps are forced into them by their families, by their parents. So it's just a very harmful message to say.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I can't understand why they're still doing it. It's wrong. It's totally wrong, against any rules and values that I have. But when it comes to those cure therapies that can make you free, the gayness, everything, is it connected with the religion or with the tradition? Or what's the root? What is the base of it?
So I think that Poland is way more. I can hear myself. Okay, no, I can't. Sorry. It was just very distracting for a minute. I apologize. So Poland is way more religious than Hungary is. In Hungary, the government prides itself to be a Christian conservative government, but if you take a closer look, they are not really sticking to this ideology very closely. The way they are formulating their policies is rather a populist manner. So, for example, abortion is not a hot topic in Hungary. They are not trying to ban abortion like they are doing it in Poland, because they know, and there are, a lot of studies showing that abortion and reproductive rights have a big support in Hungary. So if they tried to ban it, there would be a big uproar. So they're not trying to do those things. They are trying to take steps in repealing human rights and minority rights in areas that are not that supportive. So since 2012, we have seen that Fidesz has used different minorities and communities as scapegoats. They used Roma people, they used the homeless, they tried to paint the EU as an enemy. And since 2019, and migration, there was a huge, I think those news were ever in the world that, Hungary built a huge fence on its south border, and Fidesz had these huge campaigns that we are going to stop migration. And by 2019, Hungary wasn't basically taking in any refugees or migrants or asylum seekers. And you could see that people weren't really buying into this fear mongering anymore. And that was the time when senior level party politicians actually started these homophobic rhetorics. Before that, it was a few like right wing politicians like, oh, yes, ban pride. But Orban himself was very quiet about LGBTQI rights. It was basically, he said in 2016 that he thanked the Hungarian homosexual people that they are silent. And that was it. And in 2019, they started to equate same-sex couples who would like to adopt to pedophiles. A Fidesz politician called for the ban of pride. A public body fined Coca-Cola for featuring same-sex couples on its posters. So it was a very quick deterioration when it came to LGBTQI rights. And then in 2020, we saw that in the legal framework and the legal issues as well, when they banned legal gender recognition for trans people.
Yeah, Article 33.
Yeah.
Exactly. And on the October 4th of October, I think that was last year, Prime Minister Orban stated that Hungary is a patient, tolerant country as regards to homosexuality. So I have to be honest, and 7 months after, I still don't understand what tolerance Prime Minister Orban was talking about. So
I'm happy to help. So that was the whole thing. Notorious Lesbian Association, which is the biggest lesbian association in Hungary, published a book that was called Wonderland is for Everyone. That featured stories, fairy tales with characters who were minorities. There were characters with disabilities, Roma people. There was a Roma princess. There was a prince who found his love of the love of his life in another guy. There was a lesbian princess who fell in love with a girl. There was a character who was adopted. There was someone who lived with their grandparents. So it was just, showing that, the society that we live in is also, diverse. And I always feel the need to mention it. I feel like I shouldn't, but I do mention it every time. These stories didn't include, any kind of violence or sex or anything. They were fairy tales for children. And what happened is the book was published, and a far-right politician shredded it at a press release, which obviously became a spectacle and a meme overnight, and the book was sold out. And Orban Viktor was asked what he thinks about the book, and that was when he said that, oh yeah, like Hungary is a very patient and accepting country for homosexuals. And the quote goes on, and he says, but there is a red line that homosexuals should not cross. They need to leave our children alone. And to be the prime minister and to make the distinction within the nation that, oh yeah, there is the homosexuals and there is us, whose children the homosexuals need to leave alone. It's just straight horrible. It's a very specific kind of othering, when you are painting a social group as the enemy, as something that's alien, as something that is, that wants wrong. And it also perpetuated these stereotypes that gay people or LGBTQI people are pedophiles, that their mere existence is harmful for children. So that was the context for that quote, and I think that it's very sad.
yeah, actually, we did a research and we found that in 2019, the Speaker of the Hungarian National Assembly compared same-sex couples wanting to adopt the children to pedophiles, and the same was in 2019 in a Polish public television, where they refer to the declaration of LGBTQ plus rights as promoting pedophilia and dysfunctional behavior. So it's quite strong, this narrative, what they connecting with, and so it's definitely also influencing the prejudice in the society, how we think, how the whole society thinks. So there's this big increase in the political anti-LGBTQ movement, especially in Hungary and Poland. And so my next question is, from your perspective, how does this political anti-LGBTQ plus movement influence the intolerance and violence against LGBTQ plus persons in Poland, in Hungary? Because people might hear it, but do they really react to it? Do they really listen to it?
Hungary and the Hungarian society is already, atomized. These last 12 years to, use this strategy of always painting someone or a group or something as the public enemy is just very harmful. This is a very usual, common populist tactic that is usually used also in like economic recessions. And the thing is, Hungary was, it was never really like super tolerant compared to the West. I think there were a lot of frustrations when it came to the EU, in the sense that when Hungary joined the EU in 2004, there were a lot of expectations, and these expectations they weren't met. Living standards are not higher, wages are, when you compare it to inflation, are not higher. Orban has used this ideology of saying that, oh yeah, these ideologies are imported from the West. And he means feminism, he means anti-racism, he means, LGBTQI movements, completely ignoring that these social movements have had their roots in Central and Eastern Europe as well. Maybe later than in Western Europe, but they had their roots. We had the first Pride March 26 years ago, so it's not something that happened overnight. It's not something like that. But the thing is that when you normalize homophobia and homophobic hate speech to the level where as you said, the president of the National Assembly can just very casually say that couples who want to adopt who happen to be gay are pedophiles. It's, for those people who are not already a supporter of the community, an ally, it's something like, oh, one of the most senior politicians of Fidesz thinks that, like, maybe there is some merit, because why is he in the public eye? Why has he been in the public eye since 25 years if there is no merit in what he says? And if you hear those, if you hear that rhetoric again and again and again, I think that can influence you if you already have these kind of things like, oh yeah, like I don't know any gay people. Maybe they are kind of weird. Maybe they do want these, extra rights. So if you hear those things, I think it is easy to internalize these kind of homophobic rhetoric.
Okay, as we can see, like populist governments very often referring to Hungary and Poland as conservative and traditional countries rather than homophobic. Where is the link between being traditional and being homophobic?
I wouldn't equate traditionality or even religiousness to being homophobic. We have groups, for example, for Christian people who also happen to be LGBTQI. There are a lot of LGBTQI people who also, deeply believe in the tradition of, starting the family, that they are very family oriented, or they're nationalistic LGBTQI people. So these things are not necessarily contradictory. So I think that what they are doing is they are taking the motives of, or the notions of being traditional, and using the fears of what populations have, and turning that. So, for example, you can see that Eastern Europe has an emigration problem. A lot of young people leave for university, they leave for work, they can find better jobs, better education in the West maybe. And it's easy to say, oh yeah, because of like these huge numbers of Hungarian or Polish people leaving the country, we might, there will be less Hungarians or less Poles in the country. And then you can say like, oh yeah, and there are, and then the government says like, and then the migrants, they will influence our culture. They will refuse to assimilate, those kinds of things. And when you already have a fear about the population, I think that it's an easy connection to make for the government politicians.
So I want to refer to the statistics that were presented by the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights. It says that 64% of transgenders said they faced discrimination in the past year, and additionally, 73% of overall LGBTQ plus community said that the Hungarian government was definitely not effectively combating such prejudice and intolerance against LGBTQ plus people. So, from my understanding of how the world works, no child is born homophobic. So, what did go wrong, and how do we combat this discrimination that has become part of this political campaign and part of the society, we can say?
So first, I would just like to address the statistics that you mentioned. You have mentioned that you know Article 33, but I would just like to go over it very quickly so that the viewers know as well. So in 2020, on the Transgender Day of Visibility, the Hungarian government proposed a bill that effectively bans legal gender recognition for trans and intersex people. In practice, this means that if someone is trans or intersex and they want to transition, which means the process in which they start living as their gender identity, this means also a social transition, so that they start dressing and for example, getting a haircut that looks like their gender identity. It can include a medical transition, and it also means the legal procedure that they obtain new documentation that shows their name and their gender identity. And Article 33 said that the birth certificates no longer will contain the word gender, but rather biological sex, and therefore no person who was born in Hungary will be able to receive new documentation, because a biological sex, they argue, can never be altered perfectly. So anyone who is trans is unable to get new documentation. And that means that when they are carded at the bank, at the club, when places finally reopen after COVID, at the post office, anywhere, and they have to show their identification that has the gender they were assigned at birth and their dead name, that means that they are outed on the spot to these people, which means that they are more at risk to being discriminated against, being harassed, which is just terrible all around. And Hungary Society also has a legal program which is fighting against Article 33 on all accounts. We have a lot of trans clients that we took on. We also turned to the Supreme Court, and if we have exhausted every kind of national legal fora, we will turn to the European level.
Hello, Bart. Thank you for joining in.
Hello.
So I will briefly introduce our second guest, which is Bart Stachelski. He's a Polish LGBTQ plus activist and a documentary film director. So his most important project to date is the Zones photography project, where he traveled to so-called LGBT-Free Zones and took photos of people who are directly affected by the homophobic resolution. Through this project, he has become the enemy number one of the Polish government and of some organizations. And Bart, we are delighted that you are with us today. Thank you
Nice
very
to
much.
meet you. Thank you for hosting me today.
Thank you. We are just having a conversation about the situation and introduction of Article 32 in Hungary. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but Luca, please continue.
Yes, so I was just saying that when Article 33 was introduced, that was a big setback in human rights and in LGBTQI rights, and that is also part of the reason why more trans people have trouble, for example, finding a job, or because employers might discriminate when they find out that they are trans, when they see the documentation that does not match with their gender identity due to Article 33.
Which is terrible. I can't understand it. Bart, I cannot fail to mention your work for the LGBTQ plus community in Poland. So your campaign of the LGBT-Free Zones boards has caused a huge stir among decision makers, authorities, media, and other sectors. Thus, I would like to bring to light a common process which is called SLAP. And for those who are not familiar with that, SLAP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. In other words, it is a strategic legal way to silence opponents, to impose censorship in order to eventually restrict free speech. And I will not beat around the bush. It is nothing other than legal bullying. And I cannot resist the thought that Mr. Sobolewski and Ordo Iuris Institute have insisted on this way of discouraging you from your effective activism. And in such cases, I personally cannot help but voice the fact of this matter. And this is an action that is used by state bodies, businesses, and other organizations that clearly have something to hide. And Bart, my question to you is, how do you deal with this pressure from politicians and organizations who want to silence you?
Thank you for this question. I am dealing in. I took it on a daily basis because the activism used to be very different in other times, and it's like it is in our times. So the new legal way of pushing activists and fighting with them is to use the common democratic tools against the civil society and the civil rights defenders. So we see how they are pushing to the borders of possibilities, the legal ways of fighting in a normal way for a good name. So the big organization with the big finances are using them against this legal mechanism against the civil rights defenders. And for myself, I am the more they are pushing me, the more I am devoted to the things I am doing, and I see the same reaction from other activists who are suffering from slaps, and they are not working. Of course, in some way they are working because what they want, it's what is the purpose of slap is not to win an illegal suit and lawsuit that they use against you. The purpose is to take all the most of your time that you dedicated for legal defense, that the cost you will pay will that another thing that it will cost you. It is the money you need to collect or crowdfund or ask the other NGOs to help you. And those things actually are happening because I now have like 4 lawsuits and plenty of other kind of investigation against me because hanging the sign might be illegal. So the police is investigating all of those cases. I was making my photos, and each of those cases I am feeling not guilty. So I'm not telling that I made any kind of crime. So they are again making some kind of investigation, pushing those things to the court, and courts usually are finding me not guilty to anything I done. So for myself, I'm handling those things quite good. But when I see the chilling effect, how it's impacting the society and how it's impacting the LGBT people, is the simple warning: don't go this way. Don't try to fight for your rights. And it's a very clear message that we are fighting for our rights, that we will be punished by the government because those NGOs are usually with a high connection to the government, and they will do everything what is in their power to make us feel like the second category citizens.
Which is sad. And we really appreciate what you're doing. I think you're doing an amazing job, and I personally admire you. I think you have a lot of strength and you're sharing it with other people, what gives hope to bring better tomorrow for many people in Poland and also outside. So, for those who are not familiar with situation in Poland, the situation in Poland is so peculiar that people, including politicians who support LGBTQ plus, are victims of constant attacks. And I will give you the example of the Polish MEP Dr Sylwia Spurek, who firmly refuses to compromise on human rights. In so doing, she clearly supports LGBTQ plus community, which is a very frequent subject of her posts on social media. And Dr. Sylwia Spurek emphasizes that the issue of marriage equality, the right to gender reconciliation, and the protection against hate speech are not world view issues, but human rights. Um, so, as a result, I have to also mention that Dr. Sylwia Spurek is also one of the most effective politicians in taking concrete steps in the European Parliament on the issue of LGBT-free zones in Poland. But following this, the Ordo Iuris Institute, together with the MEP Patryk Jaki, announced the filing of a lawsuit in defense of Poland's good name against MEP Dr. Sylwia Spurek. So this only illustrates the extent of the problem we have to face in the 21st century, when many do not think human rights mean much and the concept itself is very limited. So it seems that those in power protect human rights, but this is not the case. We can see from the examples of the Polish and Hungarian governments that that is not actually reality. So following this, I I want to emphasize how hard and how demanding it is to be an activist in both Poland and Hungary. And despite of the fact that we have a lot of in common, our countries, we have also this common narrative that is sometimes, usually, far away from the values that European Union is providing. So, do you think, and it's a question for both of you, do you think that there's a way to start this broad international cooperation that can bring a real change to Poland and Hungary when it comes to human rights? Look, you can go first.
I was about to ask if Bart wants to go first, but
No.
so I think that you know, it's very.
He'll be back, I think. Don't
Yeah.
worry. Carry on, Luca.
Yeah, maybe it's just an internet access issue. So I think that there are a lot of ways that international corporations can help. For example, we are partaking in several projects that are, international. We have international partners, and those are very good to kind of exchange good practices. However, while I think this is a good thing for organizations, so for example, for Happier to learn from a Spanish national organization, the national context is, however, so vastly different that what they have no trouble doing is simply unbelievable in Hungary. For example, I would never imagine that those kind of legal stepbacks could happen in Western Europe than in Hungary, to ban single parent adoption, to just completely ban same-sex adoption, to ban legal gender recognition, to include in the constitution that children have a right to their bodies, and for an education in line with our Christian conservative fundamental law. Those things do not happen in Western Europe. And this is something that we struggle with a lot, to how to effectively ask for help. One thing is that most organizations and activists are severely underfunded, and most of the grants that are available to us are for projects and not for core funding. So it is good that we can run these projects, but they last for 1 or 2 years. We do training sessions, we do research, but it's not enough to fund campaigns to change things fundamentally. So those are the things that I'm concerned about.
From my perspective, I see the solidarity which is growing up, the conferences which the activists are usually meeting with the stakeholders from the European Union level and from the Polish level, from the country level. I mean that we see that we try to push our agenda as much as possible, and this is somehow working. The European LGBT equality strategy, which is ongoing, the Ursula von der Leyen speech, this European freedom speech, this European freedom zone. Of course, this is mostly some symbolic ways of showing support for the LGBT rights, and it's not enough. And the European Union is at the stake in the way where the European Union need to decide if they will be still doing policies instead of politics. And especially right now, when we see this brown power which is growing up in the power in the European Union, the Poland, Hungary, and other countries which is growing up in the conservative point of view, ultra conservative one, or the European Union will leave this zone, like left it, and then we're gonna see the end of the European because Union. It's how I see it. On the end of the story, the European Union need to show that it's a player in this political game, and has something to say, not just symbolically, but in a political power. So I strongly believe that we need to focus on working with European Union. It's ongoing process. I see it, and I appreciate what has been done, and what the European parliamentarians might do, what is in their power. Because on the country level, like, I don't see the possibilities to change anything in Poland. We can demand different things. They are not bothering about us, and they are not the only bothering where the European Union is pushing actually them. And of course, I can imagine myself that the deciders, the stakeholders from the European Union have this in their mind, that it was an economical union on the very beginning, and so it has changed a lot since many years. I can imagine myself that if Poland will have this possibility to go again to the European Union, it will never be included into it because of the loss, this all things that has happened since many years now in Poland, since Poland Justice came into power. But lots of things are under stakes, and so we need to decide and fight for our common union, or to leave it. And it's why I'm demanding so much from the European Union parliamentarians to fight for us, to fight for LGBT rights, to fight for for the human rights, which are the fundament, the base for the democratic values and the European Union. And we need to prove that they are not just the values somewhere in our story, but they are truthfully something important for us.
So I would like to ask you, Bart, about one aspect, because you mentioned already the Law and Justice Party, which is a leading party in Poland. Do you think that the rising homophobia and this anti-LGBT movement come only from the party itself and the Kaczynski and President Duda, or it's more complex?
I think uh, it's coming from the hearts of the people who has no understanding of what is the sexual orientation. We have true homophobes, not just cynic politicians, cynical politicians in our country. I believe that a lot of people who are just citizens and who are afraid of what is foreign or maybe not common, and the law and justice power is using this against us. But I still believe that Polish people are good and fine, and this is the problem with the homophobic minority which is in the government, and is quite clever on how it is using the common reaction of something that is different, that is not something that we know, and so they are using against us. So I've the only problem I think that we as a people, not just Polish people, but as a people can have, might have, is selfishness. So to be selfish, to just think about us, not about our common friend, not about our neighbor, which can be gay person, but we are just focusing of what the party can give us. I don't believe that people are believing into the things this propaganda is giving so much about the LGBT people. Everyone has the uncle who is living with the uncle. Maybe not everybody, but at least you know somebody who is in your sphere. You can be from the city, you can be from the village. You know such a situations, and you don't have anything against those people. So when I hear such aggressive voices in the parliament, uh, I don't believe that something that they are having much more voices, votes for because of those things, because the people in the common are not radicals. We can think that they are focusing about those most voters who are voting for them every time. Usually, politicians before the election are focusing on those middle voters. So what Land Justice made before and over before was to focus on very extreme people who might vote for them. So I want to believe that people are good. I don't want to say that there are no homophobia or transphobia in Poland because the problem exists. Uh, but I don't believe that we cannot change the situation. I believe that the next election will show us the truth about Polish people, the truth about, I think, the society, and who we gonna choose for the our representatives. It will tell us a lot because and also for me as an activist and human being.
Yeah, definitely. I really hope so. Um, and then I have to follow up with another question because populist leaders seek to gain support by trying to appeal to what they call family values. This also includes the last election in Poland where Andrzej Duda called the promotion of LGBT rights ideology worse than communism. And
Mhm.
another example is the member of the Polish parliament, Jacek Żalek, who said publicly on the television, and I quote, LGBT are not people, it is an ideology. So I was wondering, why does all this propaganda work so surprisingly effective on many young people, our age or younger, or those people who are the future of our generation?
I think that when you are young, you usually radicalize. When you are 16, 17, you are trying to find yourself somewhere, your own ideology. And so the conservative values might be for some people very sexy because you have everything. You just got them on the plate. You can be a Polish people and you can be proud of it. You don't need to do anything else. You are proud by your roots, and nothing else is counting. So you don't need to do anything else. It's a very sexy vision. You don't need to do anything more. So, and this is what they are, how they are seducing young people and even adults, because then they are giving back their dignity, which was not outspoken for a long time before. It was an emptiness of an ideology which was not addressed before by the previous government, because it was focusing about the freedom, the some culture things. I remember how we used to say about our previous liberal government that there was a government of the hot water and the highways, because they was building highways and they was focusing about that there will be always hot water, the electricity, the good. Those things was important for them. Nothing about dignity, nothing about the social programs for the people, and so the land justice used it, and they gave something else, and it was this conservative, ultra-conservative values, which are the discrimination of the LGBT people included, because you can be. I can imagine that the march equality is the conservative values by itself, and the West politicians came to this that as a conservative they must be also for the freedom of marry, and so it's normal. It's a very unusual thing how we are dealing with this in Poland. So I still believe that there is a lot of young people who are not buying this cheap propaganda because it's very cheap. We are living in the times of VODs, of Netflix and other, and you see there the people, and this is not just the thinking of guy who is living in the capital city, because people are watching the Netflix everywhere, and especially young people. So I think that it's playing quite a good role, and these young people know LGBT people among them, and they don't see them as a gender demons, as the politicians using this language. Of course, they're using this mainstream language that we are not fighting with the LGBT people, we are protecting the families. This is their language transformation, how they are using it. But it's another topic. So I I believe that we see the very big power among the young people who are going now on the protest, organizing themselves. The climate strike movement, the women rights movement, the transgender movement is growing up in Poland, I think. So, and it's because of the young who came on the streets. We're gonna see if those young people came from the protest, and after a few years, we're gonna change this to the voting card, and they will change the government.
Just to connect with what you said and the quote that you mentioned, Morgan, I found it very good that the European Commission actually, refused to give funding for 6 cities in Poland who declare themselves an LGBTQI-free zone. And I don't think we have talked a lot about the EU freedom strategy, the LGBT freedom zone declaration, and the strategy for 2020 and between 2020 and 2024, five for the LGBTQI strategy. And I know that the strategy has received a bit of criticism because it seems as a declaration, but there is actually a lot of potential in the strategy, because they say that they will actually develop new laws and EU frameworks and EU guidelines, for example, about equality bodies, about freedom of movement, discrimination laws, and laws about parental rights. So I am hopeful for that, and I think that that can have a very positive impact on our national situation as well, because EU funding is just detrimental for both Poland and Hungary. So that's a very big, ace in their hands.
Yeah, let me underline the importance of work that you're doing in order to fight for human rights. I'm speaking by myself as a proud European, as a proud lesbian, and I'm really like, that's what was missing for a long time. We are giving a voice for young people, for young generations that are struggling, especially right now. So the question for you is how to not be a victim in the country where government is stripping out people from basic human rights.
Should I go first? I think that having a support network is just very important for young people, to have friends that you can count on. I know that having a supportive family is just not, unfortunately, not given for everyone. But to kind of build that network around you, who can support you, whether they are LGBTQI themselves or not, I think that's very important to be able to close out the homophobia and transphobia that the media is, constantly repeating, and to just be able to find kind of, a safe space for you to be in. I know that is very basic, but that are my tips.
And I totally agree, because the small gesture of solidarity are very meaningful and very important in the time of the this all horrible things that we see. I know that the 60 or 70% of teenagers are suffering of suicide thoughts, and 30% of them have the symptoms of depression at Poland. I think it's a very common thing that are happening. So even the rainbow avatar of our friends is a very important gesture, telling us that we have someone who is our ally. The people who are straight reacting for homophobic jokes in our work, it's also something very meaningful, because we don't have the power, even us, to always react in the proper way, because we want to have a bit of energy for ourselves. So the straight allies who have this privilege should use it and always stay in, if they want to, of course, to stay in and protect us in as they can. So I think that the small gestures of solidarity on the Facebook, the rainbow flags, which are happening more and more often in Poland on the balconies of the people who are not afraid of it, and those things I see as very important.
Thank you very much. There is a question from Hassian Chef. My question is that, given the constraints overseas, what we can do to reach the Hungarian and Polish diaspora in the UK and to have those conversations. If any of you would like to take this question.
I went to the UK for university, so I was part of the Hungarian diaspora for well, a short time, that's around 3.5 years or something. I'm not entirely sure what's the best way to do it. If you have people in the car, because I have seen the chat messages, I think that they can help you reach them, and there are also kind of groups for Hungarians, or I think Polish people as well. I think Eastern Europeans make up quite a big chunk of immigrants in London. And to have the conversation about how you can support LGBTQI people. I'm not. I don't think there are any specifics. Bart, what do you think?
I don't. I'm me too. I don't have something anything on my mind. I know that the people who left Poland, especially straight one, who left Poland and they are living in UK, are quite homophobic, because they, when we see on the statistics on whom they voted, so they voted for the Law and Justice Party from abroad. So, and this is a very known trend, that the more, especially when we see the people who left Poland from when Poland came to the European Union, they were searching for better work and salary. So they are missing Poland. They are missing conservative values, because they are living in a very different country, and it usually ends that they are more radical. They are radicalizing themselves than the others. Well, like, I can imagine that the LGBT people who are living Poland for UK and other countries, it's a very different group of the people who are trying to organize the different life there and trying to live in dignity and in peaceful life. So I have nothing in my mind how we can try to find our way to those people, because we need to check if they are really interested to co-work on these topics.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to the end of the time. At the end, I would like to give a ending speech. So people say different things. Some are shaped by their own fears, but how public figures speak out about LGBTQ plus has a huge impact on shaping the society. Government should be a model and should protect everyone. Human rights are not a matter of compromise. And I repeat that endlessly. Human rights are the foundation that is being overlooked in countries like Poland and Hungary. So, as a young voice of Europe, I do not agree with any sort of discrimination. Everyone has the right to love. Love is not just reserved for heterosexuals. Everyone has the right to be whoever they want to be, and this is something as obvious to me as the fact that after the day there's a night. I think there is still a lot to do on the equality issues. It is certainly not over yet, but at the same time, I'm convinced that the conservatives will lose over time because nothing stays the same. Everything is a matter of time. Plus, the work that activists and organizations and some decision makers are doing makes the future more inclusive. I would like to thanks to today's guest for their presence, action, commitment, and perseverance in shaping a Europe that is united and equal for us. You guys are giving me hope for the better tomorrow. That was my pleasure to be a co-host today with you. And I really appreciate what you're doing. You're doing an amazing job. And we're definitely going to keep an eye on you and support you. It was amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for hosting us.
Thank you. It was our pleasure.
Thank you.